Is this pyramid of doom dealing with promises or?
It's everything, man, because you get away
Okay.
from promises and you do async await, and then you redo the pyramid of doom the exact same way, except that instead of having a dot then and dot catch, you have a try and a catch. And I'll just go into it. So whether it's if statements or whether it's try catch or whether it's promises or callbacks or whatever, like one problem that just like resurfaces in the JavaScript community over and over and over and over and over and over again, ad infinitum or whatever, is you start to get these pyramids of doom where your code starts reaching to the right further and further and further and further. And there's a couple of different problems with this I'll go over, but basically the high level concept here is that you should try to error out. Like you want to exit your program as early as you can. Usually there's some cases where you want to success out, but typically you want to error out. So I'm going to, here's a function that's kind of what I'm talking about here. So you've got this do stuff and it's got to try, and then you're going to await something. And then you've got like a bunch of other stuff that it's going to do. And maybe the success actually should be down at the bottom. Let me move that. Oh no, where'd it go? I didn't want to delete it. I wanted to move it. Okay, cool. Oops. So you got all these function calls or whatever you're going to do, and then you got some sort of if statement, and then you maybe have a try catch in that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think many of you have seen this before. So I've got a couple of ways that you can trim this down. One is most people don't understand promises from what I've observed. And I think it's really important to understand promises before you use async await. Like regardless of what your coworkers are doing or you know, how cool it looks or whatever, I would say if you don't understand promises, go find a course on YouTube or Udemy or whatever and get promises down. Because if you don't understand promises, you're really missing a fundamental understanding of the way that JavaScript works that is going to guaranteed is going to affect your ability to write clean and fluent code. But with the await, what people tend to do is write code like this where they nest things in a try catch, but then you're just, okay, now you don't have the blah dot then dot catch, but now you have the try catch. So you're still nesting inside of this pyramid of doom. So one pattern that works okay for this, let's see, where did I put that one there? Is you can switch it up. I guess I'll just live refactor. Let me get this other stuff out of the way. Oh, that doesn't actually put any spaces in it. That's okay. I'll just make a copy of this here, and I'm just going to live refactor this to make it a little bit better, and I'll make it incrementally a little bit more better. But let's just get rid of the try catch. The simplest thing that we could do to denest this, which I don't necessarily think this is the best way to go about it, but it's a way that at least gets us one level of nesting away. Like I prefer to be able to read from top to bottom rather than reading from left to right in terms of understanding what the code is doing. And right now the top to bottom doesn't work very well because if we have an error here, we don't see the error until here. And I think that is kind of weird to have like a condition on line 35 affect what's happening on line 55. But if we just want to get rid of the try catch, because really all we care about is handling any error, we're not actually going to handle a specific error, we're just going to handle any error at all, then what we could do is move our error condition. Oh, sorry, let me change it this way. I'm going to create another function called do stuff. I'm going to rename our original function underscore do stuff or do stuff helper or something like that. I'll just call it underscore do stuff. And then here we could do return do stuff dot catch and handle the error right here. And if we do that, then we get rid of our error handling down here, and we get rid of our try catch, and we get to denest our function so that it's one layer less deep. Now, I think that there's a lot of cases where you actually want to handle multiple errors. It's not just one error, and I'll go to that in a second, but I'm going to keep going with this for the moment. So now we've got if yada. The first thing that I would do, since we are, there's nothing else that happens after this if block. There's no real important stuff. We're basically just gonna catch an error potentially. So what I would say is if not yada, whatever yada is, and I'm sorry I'm using super stupid contrived names like foo and yada, but if not yada success, and then maybe we still need to write out success here. But again, easier to say if we didn't have whatever yada is, and I guess maybe I could do it like maybe that, you know, we just want to know if this is not, whatever this is, it's not happening. Then we can say this was successful and we can exit out. So now we've reduced one more layer of the code. We're keeping more from top to bottom and less from left to right. And then with the try catch, we can get rid of this as well. One reason, because when you're using async await, it's all promises under the hood anyway. So you don't even need a try catch if you don't have anything left for that function to continue to do. There's no need to have a try catch around and await if it's the last thing in the stack, because it's going to bubble up as a promise rejection. So we could just do like this, and this is pretty equivalent. And if we wanted to actually handle the error, you know, assuming that there was some good way to handle the error, then we could handle the error here. So if we don't handle the error, it won't get to success. And if we do handle the error, it will still get to success. So we have our success condition in two places rather than one. And some people might say, oh, you know, maybe that's messy. But really, typically you're returning an object or something. So, you know, let's say the true desire of this is just to return the string success. And that would be the true desire of this too. Well, if we wanted to make it so that, you know, we're not hard coding something, we could just declare way up at the top, success is success, or success is true. Let's say success is true or whatever. Then we're returning that object in two places. We're not doing any duplicate work. Now, some people might say to them, you know, maybe this looks cleaner, and maybe it does for an example that's only, you know, 10 or 15 lines long. But for me, this style right here is a lot easier to read and understand, and it's easier for me to verify that I'm handling my errors correctly, because I'm only dealing with one conditional at a time. I'm not dealing with if this is successful and if this is yada and if this is successful. Every time there's an undesirable case, I'm handling at that point and I'm exiting out of the function so that I don't have to worry about what comes next or keep that held up in my brain space. So I want to pause there for a second and see, does anybody have a question about this or a comment? You can completely disagree with me. I would be just as happy if somebody says like, I really don't like this style because, and then tell me why this doesn't feel as clean or doesn't feel as easy to read or something like that. But just before I go on, I'll take 30 seconds to let somebody ask a question.
I guess I'm a little lost on your line 52, because you're basically saying, the way I'm reading it is, if yada failed, basically you're returning success.
Because I'm using things that are contrived, I could see what you're saying there. Maybe yada should be false. So it's poor naming. But maybe it's not a matter of so much what yada means. And I wish that I'd taken more time on this. This is really just on the fly. But okay, we could turn it around if this helps you to understand better. We could do if not yada new error, but something not being there does not mean that it's a failure. It just means that it's a negative condition. Like, for example, if I am not under 18, that's not a failure. If the rule is, if you're under 18, you have to exit the building, or you cannot come to this movie, or whatever, you can't walk into the bar, then it is actually a successful condition if you are not under 18. So the point of the not here meaning success or failure isn't the case, because there's plenty of times where something not being true is the success. But for the sake of argument, we could change this to an error as well.
That was interesting, because I've always thought, like, going from the dot then chaining to this, every single time I do, I'm like, I'm still building the pyramid. So this is interesting.
I'm going to move forward, because one thing I really don't like about this example is that we now have this helper function. And the reason we have this helper function is because we want to catch all. And the reason that we want to catch all is probably because we're using Express. And so we have rec res next. And so we want a catch-all because we want a place where we can put our error handler. At least for me, this is the most common reason that I would deploy this pattern, is because I want a function that looks very nice, but then I need something to do the catch-all, and I just don't like nesting things and try catches. So I might do something like this, especially because probably on rec.body, there's something that I want, like say email, maybe, and then I'm going to pass that in. So in that case, this is not ugly. This follows a very simple model view controller, where your view is your express route, and then your controller is whatever this do stuff is effectively. And then somewhere inside of the controller, we'd be making some sort of interaction that we could consider a model, like a database or whatever. So in that case, this can be okay, because we're just separating out, there's a natural separation there between our business logic and our fidgeting with what our express route looks like. But in other cases, it's really nasty if for some reason we need to catch something and then we have a wrapper function just to wrap it. It's like tomato, potato. It's not that much better than the try catch. I think it's a touch better, but not much better. But there's another pattern that we can deploy, which I will go to down here. And I'll just refactor this example so that we keep continuity here and I'm not jumping to the solution. But let's say that I want to get rid of having a do stuff that calls a do stuff helper. Another thing that I can do is handle this the way that I want it to be handled. So let's say that foo is something that we need to await, and it can have a dot catch. You might go like this and then, try to handle the error this way. And then this starts to make a lot of sense, actually, because if there is, maybe you're expecting foo to return a yada, and there is no yada, then you need to throw a different error or something. But if you want to handle the error, the best way to do it would be if you can return something useful. Like if I don't find the user in the database, maybe I'll create an empty new user object, for example. So I want to handle the error in a graceful way, and I can just use .catch on any async function because they're all promises, and I could handle it that way. But another interesting thing is when we actually do want to exit out of the error. So I use a pattern like this. Let's just call this error, And I'm gonna clean this function away in just a second. But I actually do this. And this is a thing that I just started doing recently, and I really, really like it. And I've talked with a couple other people about it, and they seem to like it too, that it's a very clean and interesting way to handle this, that you don't really see many JavaScript developers doing this, but it makes a lot of sense. So in this case, I don't have to have yet another function. I have this pass function here that causes my error object to be returned as if it was a successful resolution of the promise, because in fact it is. So I have a pass function that says, here's an error, return the error. Well, the error is going to be an instance of error. So you're either going to have to create a function that you put the error handling logic in, or you can use this style. And I happen to think this style actually feels a little bit cleaner. And then if I need to return, so let's say that I handle the error in a successful way, handle error successfully, somehow I am able to correct it, handle terror successfully. If I were doing what I just showed previously, which I hope I'm not making this too complicated by repeating what I just did, but let's look at these two side by side. So let's say in both cases, I can handle the error successfully. So then I still have to check my yada to see, because again, like maybe I say, okay, well, I didn't get a yada, I got an error, but I handled the error in a way that was acceptable. Now I still have to check my yada and return success. So I still have to create a function, and I still have to have an if block. But if we use this pattern where we pass the error as a result and then check the error, now I don't have to create a new function for every time I want to catch something. I don't have to have a try catch block for every time I want to catch something. I simply pass the error along. I check to see if it's an error type. If I handle it successfully, then I can return out of my function at that point and not continue further down without having to worry about try catches, await async, promises, etc. Like, it gives me a very linear flow. And then if I need to, I can also rethrow the error if I can't handle it successfully. And an example of where you might be able to handle something successfully versus not successfully, not to go too deep into this, but just consider 1M versus 60. Like, if you try to parse 1M as a number, it's going to fail. But you might know that if the user put in 1M, it's because they're using your old API and it means 1 minute. And so that you're supposed to convert 1M into 60 seconds or something like that. That's a case of where you could handle an error successfully, as you could say, oh, this thing's just in the wrong format, so I need to convert it to another format, and now I can continue on, or whatever. Or the case of like the user wasn't found, but I'll just return a new user object with the email I was given. That's a way that you could handle an error successfully. So anyway, I get rid of that. And then I can do the same thing here. I could just reuse my pass. And then if I needed to do something with this value, I could just repeat the same pattern. And so then I have a very straightforward flow. And, if you want to put this pass function on one line, you can just do the old, like that, I guess, if you want it to feel like it's barely there. So anyway, these are a couple of different strategies that you can use to reduce the amount of left to right reading and increase the amount of your code that is in a procedural flow that can be followed, reading from line 1 to line 2. And that everything in the flow is in the correct order. Again, if we go back to this try catch, if I want to understand what happens in the error case, I have to skip all the way down here to figure out, well, how does the person handle that error? But if we look at this refactored example, if I want to figure out what happens in this error case, boom, I'm handling the error case on the next line. I don't have to skip around to figure out, well, what do I do with that error? Am I handling it? Is there, a way to go about it? So that's all I got. That's just my little ad hoc lightning talk. I'd be interested to hear again, like either if you think it's a good pattern or a bad pattern, or you got some questions about it. Let me know.
I'll have to give it a try to see. I'll try using it a couple times and see if I think it works.